All right, welcome back to this breaking news. Christine Blasey Ford accepts the request to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee this week coming. The exact terms and the timing are uncertain as Ford's attorney asks to continue negotiations today with committee staff. Let's bring back now Patrick Healy and Tim Naftali. So we don't know about the conditions, but we do know now that the offer has been accepted. And so, Patrick, what we understood the offer to be is that Christine Blasey Ford would testify come Wednesday, and we understood that the committee was also proposing it would just be her testimony up against Brett Kavanaugh, the nominee for the Supreme Court's testimony, no other witnesses. We know that her camp wanted other witnesses and wanted perhaps the testimony to come a little bit later, and then there was the order of it. So, Patrick, in your view, how significant, how important is it that Ford's team has accepted, as far as we know, an offer?
Yeah, it's very significant because what Christine Blasey Ford is saying to not just the committee but to the American people is, I want to testify. This is my intent. I'm going to make this work. We're figuring out the details, but I want to testify. And why that is important is because now for the Senate Republicans, anything that derails her testifying is going to look like it was arguing over, logistical or arbitrary or frankly political details in terms of, who gets to testify when or who's asking the questions. She's basically standing now on, she's taking a clear stand and position, and, it makes the other side risk just looking political if this doesn't somehow come together.
And Tim, this is still a very delicate situation because we are talking about sexual abuse allegations. We're talking about a Supreme Court nominee who would take, if confirmed, on the bench, for the rest of his life, could be another 30 years or so. And we're talking about a woman who at the time was a 15-year-old girl, who alleges to have been traumatized, and it has taken many decades in which to come to terms to even share that story.
Well, this is, this is going to be a very difficult hearing. For any human being, this will be very difficult. And it is incumbent upon the senators of both parties to handle this with great delicacy, both for Christine Blasey Ford and the accused. The Judge Kavanaugh, is innocent until proven otherwise. It's going to be very tough, and it's going to be very hard to watch, and it's important that it happen. I said I felt that the deadline today was quite arbitrary, but it's a good thing that Dr. Blasey and her attorney and the Senate are reaching some kind of compromise. But it's going to be a very, very tough hearing for everyone. But it's also a test, I believe, of how we have or have not changed since 1991, since the Anita Hill testimony.
Right, because so many comparisons are being made. CNN Supreme Court reporter Ariane DeVogue is also with us now. And so, Ariane, while we don't know the details, what's being constructed, we do know that her attorney is saying there are details that have yet to be worked out. Nevertheless, this is extremely unusual. It is very difficult, and there is great anticipation in this week ahead.
You're absolutely right. And what she said here is that there will be hearings. And she expresses some disappointment with some of the conditions. This attorney said in this statement, although many aspects of the proposal are fundamentally inconsistent with the committee's promise of a fair, impartial investigation into into the allegations, we are hopeful that we can reach an agreement on the details. And then she asks for another call this afternoon. And keep in mind, Senator Grassley had said, look, we'll have a hearing. He had said Wednesday, but he had some sticking points. And some of his sticking points were that he reserved the right to have an outside counsel come in if he wanted to. Keep in mind, there are no men on the Republican side of this committee. And he also said there'd be no other witnesses that could be subpoenaed. So it sounds like she's saying, yes, there will be a hearing. We're accepting the committee's request to provide her firsthand knowledge, but can we have a phone call? So now the ball is back in Senator Grassley's court right now.
Yeah, no Republican women, 4 Democratic women, but to your point, Tim, still very different makeup from 1991, but lots of comparisons still being made. 1991, no women, period. Now you have 4 women, but Democrats, still lots of comparisons made about, how this is being handled today. Sarah Westwood is in New Jersey, White House reporter. Give us a response, if any, coming from President Trump and his camp.
Well, nothing yet from the White House so far, Fred, on the latest development in the negotiations with Christine Blasey Ford's camp. But keep in mind that President Trump has shown a long evolution in the weeks since Ford came forward with these allegations. At first, he stuck to the Republican line of giving Ford the opportunity to testify, treating her with respect, saying she should be heard, and continuing to praise the integrity of Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court nominee. But over the course of the week, President Trump has gotten closer and closer to going on offense against Christine Blasey Ford. That started Thursday evening in Las Vegas during that interview with Fox News, where President Trump first started questioning why Ford didn't go to the authorities 36 years ago when this alleged assault took place. On Twitter Friday morning, he continued to go after Ford, continued to question her motives and the timing of why she's coming forward now, and also slamming Senate Democrats for sitting on this allegation since July when they first received it. So we don't know if President Trump is going to continue to approach Professor Ford with the caution that he showed earlier in this week, or if he's going to remain on the attack as we get closer to what looks like will be a public hearing later this week, Fred.
All right, thanks, Sarah. We also want to bring into this conversation now Avery Friedman, a civil rights attorney and law professor, and criminal defense attorney Richard Herman. Glad you could all be with us. Avery, you first. How do you classify this? Is this considered a small victory toward hearing the stories, or is this still, a very tenuous situation as we hear the Ford camp still trying to work out details?
Yeah, I'm troubled with it, Frederica. The fact is there should be an FBI investigation prior to the testimony. People are not talking about the reality that in the prior hearing with Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas, the FBI did an investigation, only took 3 days.
3 days.
That's it. 3 days, that's it. And secondly, there's been no discussion about standards. The fact is there are no standards when it comes to these kind of proceedings, Frederica, and we don't know what those conditions are. We will soon learn what they are, but I must say that it is premature to set this hearing. I'm glad there's going to be a hearing. There was a real question about that, but there are a lot of conditions that still remain unknown, and frankly, I think it is premature to go forward.
So, Richard, do you see it as a disservice that there might be testimony without an FBI investigation similar to that of the Anita Hill accusations with Clarence Thomas hearing?
Yes, Fred, because someone has to alert the president when he stands up and says that the FBI does not investigate potential Supreme Court justices, that the I in FBI means investigation. So once we get over that, and Grassley realizes that also, then we know they do the investigation. But they haven't done it. They will not do it, Fred. This whole thing is an absolute farce. It's a kangaroo court. It's absurd. It's a blemish on the history of the United States, what's going to take place this week. Because it's just like in the movie Goodfellas, when De Niro goes to the phone booth and says, did Joe Pesci get made? And the guy says to him, he's gone and there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing the Democrats can do about this. It's a train. It's a runaway freight train. And, if 36 years ago she was sexually assaulted, that's very sad, Fred. But, she's had a lot of opportunity during these 36 years to go to a district attorney and present her case. And she still can do that even after this. And I'm hoping maybe she will do that. But she's going to get nothing out of this hearing, Fred. And the Republicans in the committee, for them, they're yawning and they're bored with this because as soon as they can, they're going to vote in Kavanaugh. And there's nothing anybody can do about it.
I want to follow up with that. in a moment. But first, Ariane, you have some new reporting. What can you share with us?
Well, one thing that's interesting, if you look at it, it looks like there's a new lawyer on board working with Ford, and that's Michael Bromwich. And he's the former Inspector General of the FBI, but he's also representing Andrew McCabe. That's the other story. That's the Russia investigation. So it's very interesting to see that they've chosen now to bring in a new lawyer.
Might that promote a conflict of interest? Or questions about that? Ariane?
Well, I don't see a conflict of interest, but what it really shows is that they are recognizing that this hearing is going to go forward. They want his muscle. He's not, they wanted the FBI to get involved, and Grassley said that it would not get involved. And here they've brought on this new big player.
Avery, how do you see that?
I think it's good. We don't know, frankly, what the Senate Judiciary is going to do. Remember, one of the battles is whether or not, and it was a demand by counsel for Dr. Ford, and that is, look, no lawyers representing the senators. Let the senators ask the question. I still think, and we don't know, I still think the white Republican male senators are going to say, bring in a female attorney. That's still in the offing. So this really is going to be a battle between the lawyers.
Would that be problematic to you?
I
an outside counsel?
Yes.
Okay, and so Richard, just to follow up really quick, you mentioned, you see this as a farce. Is it because it would be, he said, she said, without an FBI investigation? And at the same time, you also said, she should have gone to authorities long ago, and there were many opportunities. And doesn't that, go to the center of how difficult it is when people, are victimized, allegedly victimized like this, how reticent, how difficult it is to go to authorities, to go to anyone, and you're talking about at the time a 15-year-old girl.
Yes, Fred, and I know that and I've read studies how when sexual assaults take place in women, and especially young women, they repress it for years and years. But it's 36 years now, Fred, and she's gone for therapy, and she's had opportunities to go make her case to a district attorney. So the optics right now look so bad. But doesn't mean she doesn't have a case, and maybe she does have a case. But the tribalism, Fred, is so strong that this is an absolute farce this week. There's nothing. They can bring on Daniel Webster. They can bring on anybody they want. It's too late. It's over.
Tim, in that Washington Post, article today, her husband talked about the visceral response she had when she saw that Brett Kavanaugh's name was on the list, and that, helped her express that she wanted to go to another country if it turns out that he became Supreme Court, justice, and that precipitated this letter of anonymity that she sent to Feinstein. What are your thoughts on this, the sequence?
Well, my thoughts on this are that we shouldn't be judging the veracity of her allegation based on how many years it took her to share it. I don't see how that is dispositive at all.
It's not what I said.
No, I'm not debating you, sir. I'm responding to Fred's.
This is not a criminal proceeding. This is not a criminal trial. You're wrong. This is not a criminal trial.
You're not right. Excuse me, I haven't made my point, and then you can tell me I'm wrong. It's possible. I make mistakes. I was going to say that that the court of public opinion is the court to which both Judge Kavanaugh and Christine Blasey Ford will be speaking. And that indeed this is not a trial. I'm not a lawyer, but I know enough to know it's not a trial. And it's a court of public opinion. And I believe this is a test of the way this country has changed since 1991. Because if you find public opinion turning against Judge Kavanaugh as a result of the credibility, let us say, of Christine Blasey Ford, he will not be confirmed. That's not to say that Donald Trump won't get another confirmation, but it just seems to me that the court that is very important this week will be the court of public opinion. And this is a test of how we've changed, if we have, since 1991.
And Patrick, it's not a trial, but if there's outside counsel brought in instead of senators asking questions, does that not send a message that it does become a trial-like?
No.
Right. I mean, it's taking it to a different place. I mean, normally the Senate Judiciary Committee members would be asking the questions. So it sort of, takes this into a a realm of, it feels like sort of a lawyer grilling her on specifics, and in some ways it feels as if the men on the Senate Judiciary Committee on the Republican side are trying to reach to optics or politics with this. Okay. It's their duty to be asking the questions, I believe.
All right, and quickly, Richard, really quick, I heard you say no.
No, Fred, it's not a criminal trial. The time for that is still. Okay. She can still do that, and she probably should do that if she feels as strong about it.
Leave it right there. Patrick Healy, Tim Naftali, Ariane DeVogue, Richard Herman, Avery Friedman. Thanks to all of you. Really appreciate it.